Hi folks, welcome to the Epochs of the Lotus Eaters number 58, where Bo and I will be talking about Agrippa, Octavian's his famous general, but very understated, I find. And I have to say, I don't know much about Agrippa at all, other than he kept winning Octavian's battles. So I'm looking forward to learning some things today.
Yeah, I think with great people in history, when you're so big and important and great and sort of tower over history in all sorts of different ways, the people that are closest to you become important in and of themselves, like Hitler's henchmen, or the people immediately around Stalin or Alexander's greatest captains, all that sort of thing.
But what I find interesting about those people is that you know quite a lot about Goebbels and all the others. You can find whole documentaries about their lives and things like that. But Octavius, or Augustus, sorry, I should say, he dominates the end of the Roman Republic so much that I know loads about him, but I know very little about the people around him, which is weird.
Okay, no, that's great. We'll take it from there. So people who might not have ever heard the name Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, just Agrippa, he is sort of undeniably Augustus's right-hand man.
Oh, yeah.
Second in command. There's sort of no doubt about that. So real quick to say, people that know their history, that there's Octavian, Octavius, and Augustus. I think it would be easiest if I just call him Augustus the whole time.
Yeah, that's fine.
Even though people that know, it's weird calling the 18-year-old Octavian Augustus is wrong.
Yes.
But just for ease.
Yeah, well, we could have just called him Caesar if you like.
Right, yeah,
No,
He went by all sorts of names at different points, didn't he?
Augustus is fine.
All right. So as long as people don't comment, he wasn't called Augustus until he was middle-aged and all that. Okay. All right. So I wanted to have say that the two people that are always written of as closest to Augustus, two closest buddies from childhood or from adolescence, are Agrippa and Maecenas. They're the two names you'll always find. And in any sort of dramatisation or anything, they nearly always get depicted, those two. And they're very, very different people. So Agrippa is your classic military man. That's really what he is, sort of down to a T. He becomes more than that, but at least first and foremost, he's a military man. And what goes along with that in the Roman age, being very stoic, being very sort of hard-willed, being very, very hard in all sorts of ways. Maecenas is effeminate and into the arts. He patronises the arts.
Right.
Augustus gives him millions of sesterces to go and commission poems and paintings and sculptures and all sorts of things.
Right.
So there's sort of, it's almost perfect in a way that you've got this sort of artistic left-hand side, Maecenas, who apparently was a bit degenerate as well. And then on the right-hand side, you've got this sort of hard-bitten general dude, implacable.
Very conservative
Very
general.
conservative, right, yeah. So there's sort of two sides. You can only imagine, historians, I have seen it said once somewhere or other, that it's sort of too perfect, that, isn't it? That it's sort of,
Augustus, the perfect centrist.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, for example, I'm going to quote from Cassius Dio a fair bit, because his history on the reign of Augustus is much longer than Suetonius's, for example. And in that, in Cassius Dio, just before the Battle of Actium, he has Augustus asking Maecenas and Agrippa for their advice.
Yeah.
Or really advice about monarchy in general. Should we win this battle? Should I try and become an emperor or a dictator or a king or not? Right? Maecenas says, you've got no choice. It's quite Machiavellian, actually.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you've kind of got no choice now. You're asking us this now? You kidding me? You've got no choice. You've got a bull by the horns.
Do you not think you're a bit far into this whole thing? To have doubts.
Yeah, you should have thought of that, like, on the day Caesar was assassinated. But anyway. And Agrippa argues, and it goes on for pages and pages. Both their speeches go on for pages and pages and pages. But they have Agrippa saying, no, don't. Restore the Republic, basicly. Like, that's the best, that's a noble thing to do. And as we all know, Augustus is like, well, thanks for your input, guys. I'm going with Maecenas, of course.
Well, I mean, he just calls himself first citizen, really, doesn't he? So maybe,
Princeps.
Maybe he's like thinking, well, there's got to be a kind of a middle ground here that I can furrow. Who knows?
Well, so we talk about the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. So, after that, he becomes, in all but name, just a king, I suppose. But he takes the title of Princeps, Princeps Senatus, sort of first citizen. And it's in 27 BC, so like 3-4 years later, he goes before the Senate, and this is all sort of political theatre, but he goes before them and says, I'm handing back all my powers.
Yeah.
I don't want this, sort of a famous scene. and they say, "Oh well, you've got to have them. We've got no other choice. Like, don't do this to us. We demand you keep all your power and have a bit more, if anything." And it was calculated. I think most people believe Augustus had no real intention of giving up any of his power.
And Augustus seems like the kind of guy who would calculate something like
yes, absolutely. That's a classic
Yes.
Augustus move to do something like that. He's probably sounded out everyone involved and knew exactly what would happen, probably. But so anyway, at the Battle of Actium a few years before, it's a bit hollow. Maybe hollow is not quite the right word to describe it, but where he's sort of debating whether or not to be the sole ruler of the Roman Empire. Like, come on, of course. Of course,
someone else.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the thing about Agrippa is that quite often in later history, it's always a problem when you have an extremely successful, powerful general, because
they might take over.
Yeah, what's to stop them from doing that?
But I guess it was personal loyalty to Augustus himself that prevents Agrippa from doing it. And what I find interesting, just a quick thing, so I'm getting the impression of Agrippa cut very much in the classic conservative Roman Republican mold.
Yes.
Very much. And, it's obviously restore the Republic. Why are you even asking me? This isn't a question. How could you think differently?
I find him likeable. I don't know if you know of the figure of William Marshall.
Oh, yes.
I think of him as an ancient William Marshall.
We're definitely, now you said it, we're definitely going to have to do an episode on William Marshall. I happen to have a book on William Marshall at home that I haven't read yet. I'm just aware of him just through cultural osmosis. We're going to have to, through reading about Richard the Lionheart, actually, I learned about William Marshall.
I'm going to hold you to that.
We will definitely do it. It sounds great.
This is a pledge from me to you guys. I'm going to hold him to that. No, I'd love to. I love William Marshall.
Yeah.
Agrippa feels like an ancient Roman William Marshall. It's sort of like he kind of doesn't put a foot wrong, or whenever there's like a dodgy situation where it's not clear what to do or what's best to do, he makes the right decision nearly every time. And I think a bit maybe like an Arthur Wellesley. There's just no question that he would ever march an army against his emperor.
His friend.
There's just his friend. Yeah, there's no question. So I've got a couple of quotes here, and they're from sort of different points in Cassius Dio's account, but I think they sort of paint a picture. So here's one he says, and it's on the question of loyalty, I suppose. He says, Cassius Dio says, quote, "In this year, 26 BC, Agrippa dedicated the precinct known as the Septa. He had not undertaken to repair a road, but instead he had decorated with marble tablets and tables this enclosure, which is surrounded by porticos and had been constructed by Lepidus in the Campus Martius for meetings of the Comitia Tributa. Agrippa named it the Septa Julia in honour of Augustus, and so far from incurring any jealousy through his actions, he was signally honoured both by Augustus himself and by the rest of the people. The reason was that he gave Augustus advice of the most humane, the most ambitious, and the most advantageous projects. On the most ambitious and the most advantageous projects. But he did not claim even the smallest share of the glory which they earned. Instead, he used the honours which Augustus conferred upon him, not for his personal gain or enjoyment, but for the benefit of the emperor himself and the public at large." End quote. And that's just one sort of taste of how Agrippa conducts himself.
He's a team player, right?
Yeah. I think a bit more than that. I think it would be fair to say that he absolutely appreciates the position he's in. So one thing to mention before I do another quick quote is that he wasn't an aristocrat.
Ah, right.
Okay, so...
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Right, okay. So for anyone who's not aware, Rome is a highly stratified society along class lines. You could be a very from the lowliest slave to the sort of free men to the knightly order, the equites, to the patrician class. He's not one of the patricians, whereas of course Augustus is. And so there's being British, I very much understand this class system that they have, and that explains a lot about Agrippa and his loyalty to the person above him, because morally he's above him.
Yeah,
that's the way they looked at it,
and legally as well. Our class system it's like an old boys' network. It's not. It's
a bit more informal. Isn't
there's nothing formal about being a British aristocrat. There's nothing in law saying you have privileges more than others. Of course, the reality of how you get to live your life. But whereas here, there is a legal distinction between plebs and patricians and equites and all sorts of things. And he's a pleb. His family are plebeian.
Oh, he's not even equity.
Yeah. It seems they're well-to-do and had a bit of money, and I'll get into why we think that. But certainly, we don't know much about his family at all, really. We're not even sure exactly where he was born and things. But he's not patrician. Another quick quote here, just about his character from Cassius Dio.
Before we go on, that must have really, really annoyed certain people. Like, can you imagine Mark
this
Antony?
pleb gets to be one of the most important people.
And also keeps winning.
Oh, right, yeah.
Like, that must have been really annoying. Anyway, so carry on.
Well, because there is a thing that sort of, I think that people that defend aristocracy, they think that sort of...
they're better?
Yeah, like the quality of their blood is better.
Their political party was literally called the Optimates,
right.
The best, and you've got this pleb who keeps winning all of these battles for the Optimates, incidentally. You know, it's like, okay, it's an embarrassment.
I can't remember where it was, but some documentary or other, I heard some British aristocrat from the early 20th century saying it's a birth thing.
Yeah, that's what they thought.
Like, that's it. It's who you were born to and what your blood is.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. In many respects, the aristocrats actually were better. As in, they had better diet, they had better education, they had better like tutorage, and like they had better social opportunities and things like this. So in many ways, you actually can say there is a tangible difference, not necessarily in blood, but in material circumstance and opportunities in life, and the way they are thought to think of themselves as well. Because I mean, a lot of as history has shown us, and we're adherents of the great man of history thesis, right? A lot of what history has shown us is audacity. It gets you a long way if you're even vaguely talented. Right. You know, it can get you a long, long way. And so thinking highly of yourself to put yourself forward into these risky positions, again, it's kind of an aristocratic trait. You know, most commoners will be like, well, I'm not going to do that because obviously I can't. And so there isn't, it's not that there's nothing behind the idea that the aristocrats are the best, because they actually have the best of everything and naturally flourish because of it. So I'm not saying it's fair or equal or anything like that, or it should be that way, but there is an aspect of that I think in the modern era, with us being egalitarian, we want to pretend doesn't exist. And I've got a really great example of this. Did you ever watch the Russell Crowe Robin Hood adaptation?
I got about 20 minutes in, 30 minutes in, and turned it off.
It was awful.
Yeah, I couldn't.
But there's one point in it where Robin Hood is dressing up as a knight to return back from France. And he says there's no difference between a knight and a peasant, except for the armor or something like that. And it's like, that's just not true. It's just not true. The diet was different. The training was different. You know, all of these things.
They would have been highly educated in comparison.
Exactly. And they would have been physically stronger because they train all day, every day since the age of about 7. So it's just like, this is a modern fiction that we try to impose on the past. And I wish to disabuse us of it. Sorry. Anyway.
Well, so I absolutely agree with you there that it's obviously one way of putting it is like they've got all the opportunities that you could possibly hope for.
But they never go hungry.
And the net result of that, by the time you get to adulthood, is massive.
Yeah,
But sort of what they would say is that, like a royal family, it's not even including any of that. It's that your actual blood, your cells of your body are noble, and other people's aren't. And so that is
that's a mythology that's overlaid on top of it, isn't it? You know,
that the purity of your blood, is important. Here's another quote from Cassius Dio, just about on the character of the man, before we sort of dive into the details of his life. He wrote this, quote, "Such was the character of the man. Others laboured to secure triumphs and celebrate them, not for feats of arms that could be compared to his, but merely for arresting outlaws or pacifying cities that were at strife with no other. And then he, Augustus, conferred upon Agrippa a number of privileges which were almost equal to his own, in particular the Tributian power, for the same period as Augustus, which was 5 years, but then later extended to 10 years. So Augustus, this is later in their life, this is when they're sort of getting on a bit in middle age, he gives him essentially the same powers as him.
Working boy done good.
And and I mean, it sort of speaks of just an absolute trust. It's sort of something beyond the word trust. It's like we're the same person.
Yeah.
It's like, there's an old line, isn't there, where Alexander says something about Hephaestion was... Yeah. He is Alexander. He is another Alexander. It's almost like this. It's like, again, at different points in the story, in the life, Augustus will send Agrippa off into the empire, and he's basically a viceroy. He's basically another emperor in all but name.
Yeah.
And nearly in name.
I mean, the level of trust that Augustus must have had to Agrippa, it just can't understate it. And I mean, this must have been scandalous as well. for the other patricians. They must have been like, how can you do this? It's got to be the first time this has been done.
Yeah, a little bit. The reason why it wasn't is because he seemed so popular. He seemed like such a William Marshall popular. But also that all the lions of the patrician...
Probably dead by now.
Yeah, they're all gone.
Yeah.
Anyone that would have stood up and said, I'm not having this, their family line was ended a couple of generations ago, probably by Sulla. Yeah. So by this time the Senate are people that are quite cowed, you know. Anyway.
No, I think that's the best way to describe them.
And that thing I mentioned there about it could have had a triumph and decided not to because it was too ostentatious. It was sort of too in Augustus's face, you know. And so that's remarkable, isn't it? Very remarkable. Very few people, you know, if you say have £1 million or have an Oscar or something, they go, no, please.
But, I mean,
not many people capable of that, you know.
Yeah, but there's a part of me that's thinking Agrippa kind of knew his place, right? He was like, look, I know where I am in this hierarchy, you know. And Robert Conquest's 48 Laws of Power, the first one, never upstaged the master. It's like, look, I don't need the triumph, you know, give that to Augustus, obviously. You know, it's not for me. I'm just a loyal servant, you know, maybe it's like that.
I think it is, yeah. I think he absolutely knew his place. I think, and this is just my personal opinion, reading between the lines, there's no ancient source I've read that explicitly says this, but I just think he was, if anything, grateful to be where he was. It was like he sort of knew that he'd been plucked out of obscurity, pretty much by pure luck. He went to school with Augustus, that's how they met. Just by pure luck, he found himself where he was and was happy to. Again, like I say, sort of wouldn't dream of trying to usurp Augustus. So yeah, it's great. And Augustus, one of Augustus' greatest things was picking the right person for things. Yeah. Sometimes he got it wrong, but he obviously saw in Agrippa all of that. He obviously saw and realised it and appreciated it.
I just find that fascinating though, is well-to-do commoner. The parents, you know, the dad sends his son to a nice school where the patricians send their children because he can afford to. And from that, you know, you can see how that gets him into the old boys network. And it's very interesting how the class distinction is bridged like that. But yeah, I imagine that Agrippa is very conscious of his status of having plebeian blood and is very aware that, like, you know, there's no point. You know, what am I Agrippa, the peasant? So the son of a peasant going to be the ruler of Britain? No, come on, let's not be silly. However, I can do really, really well as Augustus's second in command, which he does. So it's very, very prudent, I would say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If I could read this couple of lines here about that triumph thing, because this is one of the things that gets said about him a lot in all the accounts. This side of it comes up because I've said it before somewhere, and people who know their Roman history will know this. But a triumph is massive.
Oh yeah,
there's no equivalent. It's way better than being elected consul.
It's getting the whole city to praise you.
Yeah, and there's like a very small number of men that's ever been awarded to.
Yeah.
They say the most prestigious thing is killing in single combat the head of a foreign tribe that you're at war with. That's like happened 2 or 3 times, probably only twice, because one was sort of legendary. So that is in fact the rarest, the highest thing any Roman could ever aspire to. Short of that, it's a triumph. So to turn it down, it's really quite amazing, really, it seems. People basically say that. It's amazing.
And just a quick thing, as I understand it, basically the army and their general get to have a procession through the city, showing off the captured war booty and slaves, and the population of Rome would line the streets and cheer, and then there would be a massive feast afterwards. Everyone would get very drunk.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're literally getting the entire city to celebrate your existence and success. So, yeah, I can totally see why all of these other generals wanted the triumphs. And I think this really emphasizes the point that Agrippa turning this down, I mean, it's very interesting because, like, my dad comes from peasant stock, and he was in the RAF, and he repeatedly got offered promotion to become an officer. He stopped at being a sergeant in the RAF, and he repeatedly got offered being promoted to being an officer. And I always asked him why, and he would just say, it's just not for me. It's just not for me. And it was only when I got a bit older and realized, well, the officer corps is all aristocrats, basically. You know, they've got the very plummy accents. They're, you know, all people who have gone through like Sandhurst or wherever, and, you know, some military academy, and have, you know, a natural social advantage like that my dad was just uncomfortable engaging in, and just he didn't feel it. It was just above his station is how he viewed it. And this is very much how Agrippa sounds to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think of the fictional character Richard Sharp, where he was an enlisted man who ended up being an officer. Wellesley created him an officer. It's a fictional character. But the whole part of that is that he's uncomfortable and never fully accepted.
Yeah.
And just,
She's not a part of that social class.
Yeah.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.